Maybe. There it is. Okay, we're live. There it is. All right. So, hello everyone in podcast land, and more importantly, all two listeners of the No Decaf podcast. No, we are joined today with Matt Schmidt, the founder of PeopleLogic.Ai. And so welcome, Matt. I'm really excited to have you on. And I think we're going to have a really good conversation, especially with the climate that's going on with whole COVID and all that stuff. And as far as analytics go, but I guess to kind of lead us into our conversation, tell us a little bit more about your company and what you're doing and the problems that you're trying to solve with PeopleLogic.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Adam. And, I'm sure you've got more than two listeners, and hopefully we'll expand that reach a little bit after this.
For sure.
But thanks for having us on. And, so PeopleLogic is all about helping companies be able to get out in front of the risks and spot the opportunities that can either help their businesses grow faster or keep them from growing. We started it to help small and growing tech companies be able to use the data that their teams are generating to be able to understand their business and their people better. So really this intersection of HR and analytics, and more commonly called people analytics. But we did that to started to help managers better understand their people, and really expanded that to be able to help businesses be able to keep growing at the scale that they want to, without stepping into the pitfalls that keep them from growing.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of, especially like me, non-technical co-founders who are just super sales driven, which is good. You need sales to survive, right?
Yeah.
But for people like me who are just, maybe they don't have that HR background of human capital management, and what is that, and why is it important, why is it relevant, and why is it important to know how to manage your people? It's not just, oh, you're a sales guy, you know how to do sales, let's just go do sales and then go from there. And if you don't like it, well, then we'll just, kick you out the door and then go to the next one. Why? And what causes that 90-day phenomenon of someone coming in and then just completely going off of a cliff as far as performance goes? And analytics is the key to that. And I'm kind of curious to know what inspired you to make PeopleLogic. Was it kind of like that, or how'd that get started?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things, right? As most people know, most of the biggest problems that impact a business have to do with its people at some level, right? And whether that's whether you hired the wrong ones, or whether you aren't training them, or whether you've got them doing the wrong things. At the end of the day, there's either people problems or there's operational problems, right?
Right.
And in your sales example, it's, there's PeopleLogic fits into that place of being able to, one, make sure that we're making sure that managers and leaders are keeping an eye on the right things as it relates to their people, but also keeping an eye on those operational elements. And doing that, so, are you making enough calls? Are you closing the deals at a rapid enough rate to hit your quota? Are you, have you opened up enough leads to be able to do enough calls to be able to have those opportunities, those types of things, right? And we're doing that not just in one specific team, but in sales, engineering, customer success, your executive team, so for the business as a whole. And, I think it's we started this because as we were scaling the company, at different points in growing the company, we saw different types of problems. Sometimes it's related to being able to keep great people. Other times it's related to we're missing our goals, but we don't understand why. And so what I discovered as we went through an exit, and I stayed on after that exit and discovered all the we're using all these tools. We put all these tools into place. But the getting into the data, getting into, understanding that data was a really heavy lift, right? And so small companies can't reach easily into hiring data analysts and hiring data scientists, or training their their teams and their managers to be able to understand that data more easily.
Sure.
And so the tools have to be easier to use, right? And so even if you look at traditional BI tools, they require a lot of training so that you can understand how to connect all the systems to it, or you can understand how to get the data that you want, and then you still are dealing with an interpretation problem, right? What does the data actually mean? What is it telling you? And so what PeopleLogic is doing is sort of taking the guesswork out of that. We're not making you need to have an analyst or have a data scientist. We're giving you prescriptive recommendations that help you better run your teams. And then we're giving you the ability to get predictive insights into seeing the direction that your business is going to be going, and how to be able to get out ahead of the things that might make you slip and fall along the way.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So essentially the history of how you even came up with the idea was after the exit of that company, and you just kind of taking a step back and saying like, oh, I have this issue. And how did you go out and test market that? I mean, did you go and say, well, since I have this issue, let me go ask some of the people who are kind of like at that same point?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, we've been fortunate here in Durham to have a number of companies that were in that same sort of stage. And, I went through a bit of an accelerator here. And as part of that, it's really very focused on sort of customer discovery, right? And so I use my network and the network of the accelerator to go through and talk to people who were in the same stage, managers, CEOs, COOs, of people that were in tech companies that were, sub 100 employees that were growing and running into the same sorts of problems that I had discovered. And,
Sure.
in the time since, we've talked to hundreds of companies that have similar problems and are looking for a solution to the problems that have only been made worse by the fact that now that everybody's remote.
Okay, that makes sense. And I kind of did a little bit of stalking on you, a little bit. So from your last exit, it was called. It starts with a D, I believe.
Yep, D-Zone.
Right? D-Zone,
and
yeah.
Devada. Yep.
And Devada, right. So I saw you kind of started off there, not as you at that point became a CEO, right? But you kind of started or a president. Yeah. And you built your way up. So obviously you've seen kind of the different levels and the different positions and what they entail, which obviously gives you a really good insight as to what to look for and how, and what are the key positions to look for in a company as well, which from what I'm hearing, this is kind of like a two-sided question. So is the way that your company works, is it modular in a sense to where you're like, okay, well, do you need help at the executive level and do you need help at the people level, or is it kind of like just the people level and we can just work on that?
No, it's really very focused on these two different personas, right? The one being the executives, and if you are going to use a certain part of the application for that, right? And the value,
Right.
the ROI that you're going to get out of an application like PeopleLogic is different for an executive than it is
Sure.
for the people operations professional or an HR professional who's bringing their individual teams into it, right? And so the prescriptive recommendations that are helping an individual manager are different than the ones for an executive.
Right.
How you might leverage the insights if you're an engineering manager during a sprint review or a sales leader during a one-on-one are different than the types of things that you might look at when you're looking more holistically across the broader business.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and it leads me kind of to my next question as well. Is like, what would those key hires be in terms of, for your tech company, right? And would PeopleLogic kind of help with that as well, or I mean, what are your thoughts?
I don't. We've really made the focus to be on the sort of, how to optimize an employee's journey post hire.
Post-hire,
Right.
okay.
So that's really there's a ton of platforms out there that are focused on the front end of the employee experience, this hiring experience. Trying to do everything from build a better mousetrap to acquire these people, to making it easier for your recruiters to find them, to testing and AI filtering and all these things, right? And there's a ton of people that are in that space.
Yeah.
We're really very focused on the optimizing both the human performance, but then also the business performance. And in our view, they're intertwined really tightly. You
Right.
can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, going back into the whole sales thing, right? I mean, you can't have a company without sales, but and that also leads me to my next point with especially the whole COVID situation. How long have you guys been launched?
So yeah, we launched on March 17th, which
Oh
here in
wow,
North Carolina was the day that everybody got locked at home.
yeah,
So we didn't intend to launch right in the middle of the pandemic, but that's when the product is cooked when it's cooked, right?
right.
And so we decided to launch, and in that time, we have been able to get a ton of good feedback from partners and prospects, and really been able to narrow the product down into something that is providing value for the people that have signed up.
Well, I think now would be a really good time for people to use something kind of like PeopleLogic, especially with, I mean, because you could go one of two ways. Either a company's in a position to really scale and get market share, especially with all the layoffs. I mean, the talent war could be easily
Yep.
won. And on the other hand, if you don't have that and you're trying to run more lean, this would be a way to optimize that as well. And so we actually started our company during the same exact time, funny enough. Now, obviously, I'm a non-technical co-founder. This is my first time, actually running a tech
Mm-hmm.
company. But I find that this is probably the best time to run a startup. I guess depending. I mean, if you're running a startup based on like Disney Cruise Lines, then it's probably not the best time to do it.
Yeah, if you're a travel startup, I'm afraid that this has been a really tough couple
Yeah.
of months for you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, good luck getting funding, right? Like, hey guys, Disney Cruises, it's gonna be great. But I feel this is really the litmus test almost as far as if you can survive this, especially like just starting up and
Mm-hmm.
scaling and growing. I mean, that's been my experience. I mean, what's been your experience as far as like the whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, right? Because this is not the first economic challenge that I've grown a business through. And so,
Sure.
but the first being the dot-com crash in 2000, 2001, and then the financial crisis in 2008. And, but those were very different than this, right? This is just a more of an existential crisis,
Sure.
while at the same time, it's hard to understand the full impact when you have the stock market behaving opposite of what the broader population is feeling,
Right.
right? And so I think while there certainly have been challenges, I think that I think the broader these types of environments are usually great times for people to start businesses. And
Yeah.
one, because often, necessity is the mother of all creation, right? And so, you've got people who would not normally have found themselves to have the time to create a business, who, for whatever reason, have the time now,
Right.
right? And they're hungry, right?
Yeah.
And so hunger is a huge component to creating uh, success in a startup,
They almost like
right?
burned the ships.
And so that's what we've seen is that there's it's a mixed bag. It depends on the industry that you're targeting. We're selling software, and so as part of software budgets have been really constrained pretty quickly and heavily, but we're starting to see those come back around. And I expect that with the right messaging and the right focus, it's a great time to start a business.
Well, it's crazy because I've been reading a lot as well, and by reading I mean Audible. so so and so I guess I've been listening to a lot of books, and one thing, as far as going into, I believe it was Salesforce that I was listening to, and I think it was from 0 to 1, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that may be it. I don't know. I could be getting the titles confused, but regardless, they were talking about how if you become a vendor, there's only a certain amount of money that's allotted for vendors, and it's not a lot, right? But when you become a solution to a big problem like
Yep.
Salesforce has, now I'm not a fan of Salesforce, but obviously they do
They've
solve
done okay.
problems. They've done way more than okay. And they solve a problem, and people, pay, 1 to 2%, maybe even more of what their of what the earnings are as far as like for that solution.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, while software, and that's what I've been trying to push as well, is while software budgets have started to kind of come back a little bit, and they, even receded a little bit as far as when the initial hit of COVID started. But if you're selling a solution to a problem that people have, I mean, people are willing to pay anything that they can for that particular solution if the pain point is big enough, especially so to your point, messaging is crucial as well.
Yeah, and being crisp at that, right? I mean, so it really comes down to, have you identified a market that has a problem that needs solving, right?
Yeah.
Then if they have that problem, are they willing to pay to solve that problem? Because there are problems that people are willing to just not, not continue to pay to solve, right? And then, once you've done that, can you find a price point that lines up with the ROI that they can expect to see as part of using your solution, right? And if you can do that, then that's sort of business value 101, right? Like that's and I think people are willing to buy new tools now that solve the problems that they have, regardless of the time, right? Now, again, that then it also comes down to who is your buyer within an organization, right? The person is, the CEO, the executive team is probably always willing to look at a problem solution, regardless of what the quote unquote budget is, right? Whereas if you're selling more to like middle management, they are going to go with the sort of party line, like, hey, budgets have been cut, we can't buy anything, right? And so, again, it's whether you see success or not is really dependent on that type of scenario.
Yeah, and things have changed, right? Especially like with everyone working remote, and I mean, everyone's working remote. I mean, I guess not everyone, but a lot of people. I mean, you see a lot of companies like Apple and I think Microsoft too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So they started working remote. I mean, how's that played into like your guys' strategy as far as that goes? I mean, is there like any software that you're putting on people's computers and saying, hey, we're gonna monitor everything? Or
you just said that's a 4-letter word here. No, there's monitoring is something that we never use and that we don't do, right? So everything that we do is using the APIs that the tools that your teams are already using are producing, right? So Google has an API, a way to communicate without the interface that you see at Google, or Salesforce or HubSpot or any of those, right? And so we connect to those, and we use that information to look to produce trends and averages and benchmark against yourself and your team and the organization to be able to produce the types of recommendations and insights that we need. Because what we have found is that there's very little benefit to this monitoring, right? Yeah. It doesn't, and we're primarily dealing with tech companies. We're dealing with knowledge workers, right? And monitoring doesn't accelerate their performance. It has the opposite impact.
Yeah, right.
And so, because human nature is to sort of revolt against that. But what we have found is that, while there is a pushback against the idea of monitoring or having anything installed on your computer, which we would never do,
Right.
there is about 90% of employees are perfectly happy to let their data be used that they're generating as part of doing a business,
Sure.
if it provides value to them. And so what we're doing is bringing that back around to be able to help improve their employee experience, be able to improve their overall performance, to be able to help their manager better understand them, to help the business succeed more reliably.
Yeah.
Right. And so when that's the case, then their data is used for good. And one of the things that we're about to release in the next week or so is an employee dashboard that shows the employee exactly the type of information that we're capturing, the recommendations that we're generating to help them improve their performance without
Sure.
the need for the manager to be guiding them, to show them the activity, their personality profiles, those types of things. So we're going to be bringing that information front and center to give them access, beyond simply what we might show to a manager or an HR professional.
So essentially, you're not necessarily replacing the management. You're almost like, if you look at it like a bowling alley perspective, and you're throwing your ball down the road, it's almost just providing those bumpers along the way to keep them on track. And you may not hit a strike, you may get like 4 or 5 pins every time, though, right? Which is better than most. So
yeah, so if you can improve the performance, right? Like if the standard is a 40% success rate, and we can change that to 55 or 60%,
that's
right?
huge.
That's a huge improvement, right? And so we're not looking to replace manager. We're not looking to build an AI CEO, right? We're looking to augment those roles so that they can be focused on what's really important to the business, and that's helping that business grow.
I think I'm going to go buy that domain, AI-CEO.com. It probably exists already. Hold on, we'll be back from our sponsors. Insert AICEO.com right now. Do it. No. So tying back to like what the story you shared earlier, because I think this is a problem that if you're not thinking of it from like a 30,000 foot view perspective of your company, because all I'm thinking about, if I didn't have that HR background, that HR experience with kind of what I know now, I would just only be thinking of sales, appointments, sales, maybe more appointments. Like I wouldn't be thinking about anything else, because it's almost like a problem that it just kind of snowballs, and it gets to a point where now you're like, well, I'm here, I have employees, but I don't really understand how to keep them, make them happy, make them more productive. So how could, I guess going back to your first company that you sold, the exit, how could PeopleLogic have helped that company in your first organization? Because I feel like that's where a lot of people are at right now, is like their first organization.
Yeah, that's a lot of times the biggest thing is when you're in it for your first time, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you can read about other things, and you can try to mimic other companies, but that is a dangerous path to go down, because every company is different, right? Even though there are similarities around the common problems that you fall into. One of the things that PeopleLogic does is that it doesn't try to benchmark you or build models that are aggregates of our other customers, because your performance, your business's performance, your goals and objectives are specific to you.
Sure.
Right. And so we build these insights and these recommendations against your own data, and not on sort of a broader view of what we're doing. So I think we started with 2 people, and double over the course of like 18 years, right?
Yeah.
And along the way, we did a lot of things right. We got a lot of things wrong too. I think part of what PeopleLogic could have done is, a couple of things along the way. Sometimes it was, it could have possibly helped us in the earlier days, maybe in the 30 people range, to be less surprised when we had attrition.
Yeah.
Right. Because we would have been able to see that a person's the way they're communicating was changing, or the frequency that they're communicating was changing, or in the as was most often the case, that the relationship between them and their manager wasn't as good as it could have been, and PeopleLogic could have helped with that. Later on, as we move through, a lot more time at the executive team level gets spent digging into things that have already happened and trying to understand why they happened, or why a particular number was off track.
Yeah.
And what we're aiming to do with PeopleLogic is to give you the insights into why those metrics, why those goals, why this particular problem has happened, to let you get out ahead of that and not spend half your day.
Yeah.
Right. And so, how many times have you been pulled into a new daily stand up to, basically post-mortem a problem that, if we had access to that 30,000 foot view looking across our data set, we could have realized that, like, hey, we just haven't been staying on top of communicating to this very important customer.
Sure.
Right. Or, hey, it's obvious, a month and a half in, that we haven't even produced anywhere near the opportunities to be able to hit our goals.
Right.
And so those are the types of things that we're helping businesses get out ahead of, so that they don't have to waste their time having 10-person stand-ups every day to beat a horse to death over this problem.
Yeah.
Or that we to help CEOs and executives who are running by spreadsheets to stop running by spreadsheets and be able to understand why a number is off track, without them having to spend half their day digging into why that number's off track, and then doing that day after day after day after day. Right.
That makes sense.
Because if they get, I mean, for most executives, imagine how much more the business could grow if those businesses were focused on the strategic initiatives and the growing of the business, if they didn't have to spend half their day chasing down a particular number from a spreadsheet because it was off track.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
That's the heart of the problem that we're trying to solve.
Okay. Fair enough. And honestly, I think this is a good way. I mean, depending upon how you're running your company, if you're trying to exit and you have a micro or a what are those things that I'm drawing a blank right now? Those things that used to burn ants with. You know what I'm talking about? Magnifying glass.
Yeah, that's a magnifying glass. Yeah.
So you almost have a magnifying glass in your company, and if you're trying to exit, I guess this could be another reason that this would be good for. Maybe your previous venture is like when you go into someone who's trying to buy your company, you're like, hey, look, here's what PeopleLogic is saying, right? And have like a really good understanding as far as how your organization is running. And I also find it kind of scary a little bit, as far as, hey, this guy used too many times, and we usually find that he's gonna probably be leaving here in about 26 minutes. You got 26 minutes to go save him.
We're not quite that efficient yet with our communication. And it's at the end of the day, as I said earlier, we're augmenting your team.
Yeah.
Right? Because we still need you to bring your expertise to bear, but we're trying to help you we're going to be a supplement to your gut feeling. Right?
That makes sense.
Because too often when people have a gut feeling, the gut feeling is often right, but by the time you've had the gut feeling, it's too late.
So you're almost, you kind of got like that cartoon where you got like the devil and the angel kind of on your shoulder. When other people, they just kind of have like the devil there, and you only got the angel like, oh, yo, what should I do? You're kind of like that other person. It's like, hey, don't do it. Almost.
You gotta have a balance when you're running a business, right?
Yeah.
And because running a business is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and every week is different. And some weeks you're on top of the world, you're feeling like things are great, and the next week, you feel like you've been hit by a bus because nothing's going right.
And a
right?
certain
And
platform
so
shut down your access and you can't do anything, you know?
I
Now you're
mean,
just
if you're
stuck.
Epic Games, that's it.
Oh, too soon. Too soon. That's a crazy one too. So
Yes.
what is, I guess, what's your vision for PeopleLogic? Like, where do you see it going? Do you see it kind of moving in more of like an HR, like even more of like an HR space, kind of like that predictive analytics? Because there's a lot that I feel like that's a really big market that's going to be hitting here in the future, is the predictive
Yeah, I
analytics
think
side.
there's been a ton of growth, obviously, in HR tech and in um, particularly people analytics within HR tech. I think there's still an underinvestment from a venture capital and from businesses willing to add HR tech. Right now there's two places where HR tech is seeing a lot of love. It's in this like engagement surveys
Mm-hmm.
and then also OKR software. Those are the two darlings right now. And I
Mm.
think for most companies, there's an underinvestment in broader data analysis and insights and those types of things. So I think we exist in this cross section between business intelligence, business performance, the people analytics, and I think we're going to continue to see that grow. The market for business intelligence and business analytics is growing at something like 15% year over year.
Yep.
And so it's a huge market. The more businesses are getting started all the time. The need to be data driven is something that's really just at the beginning of its infancy in terms of how we run our teams.
Sure.
But long term, yeah, I think our goal is to get into as many businesses as we can and be able to help these SMBs, of which there are hundreds of thousands of them in the U.S. alone,
Yeah.
be able, and not just the one person company, right? The 10, 30, 50s, the hundreds. Those are there's hundreds of thousands of those, and
Yeah.
our goal is to get into as many of those as we can and be able to help them transition from managing by spreadsheets and and gut feelings to true data driven decision making, and be able to give them the insights they need so that they fail less. Because there's even when you get to 5 million or 10 million, you can still make mistakes that if you'd only been paying attention to the data, you could have avoided.
Sure.
And
They just
that
don't
can
hurt
keep
as
you from
bad.
continuing. Or they hurt a lot more when they're at 10 million,
True.
right?
Yeah.
And so, those are the types of things we're looking to solve.
Fair enough. And so I wanna leave everyone with a couple of points from someone who's exited a company, started another one. What are the three most important points for any entrepreneur or even someone who's wanting to start,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of whether debating on whether or not they should pursue their idea?
Great question.
I don't want to Gary V. You're gonna die. He already did that. No.
No, it's those are great. I mean, I think it's at the heart of it. I think it's easier to focus on the sort of what's it take to start something, and to like at the end of the day, only like you're going to hear a ton of people that are going to tell you that your idea isn't good enough, or that you're never going to make it out of anything, and like you have to just like block those people out, right? And it's not to surround yourself with like yes men, right? That's not what I'm saying at all, but it is
Right.
to starting a business is hard enough that you can never doubt yourself. So that's the sort of the nugget here, is like you always have to believe in yourself and what you're doing and be able to continue to push forward so that you can get up every morning and do what you think is the next right thing to do. And you're the only one that can know what that is, right?
Absolutely.
And there's no, there's nobody there to tell you what the next right thing is. You're the boss,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's
So
PeopleLogic.
up to a certain point,
Yeah.
right? So it is really, you have to remember it's a marathon. It's going to take you a lot longer than you thought it would take you, right?
Yep.
And you have to be, as part of that marathon, you got to remember that there's going to be ups and downs, and that every week is going to have peaks and valleys. And I would say the best thing you can do is find some great listeners to be there beside you and help you. Whether those are advisors or coaches or your early employees that you trust and you can talk to, right?
Yeah.
It's super important to be able to have other people to express your fears, your frustrations, so that you have an outlet for that. Because otherwise, it gets the highs are very often accompanied by some really dark times too.
Yeah. And even in the highs, they don't even feel that good,
The very next minute, you feel like they're gone already, right? And
you
so
feel
those
like
are,
your stomach's turning.
yes. And so those are, it is about just remembering that, if you really believe in your idea, find a way to make it happen. That's
Boom.
really
And
believe it.
it's so funny you mentioned that. My mom messaged me last night at like 10 p.m. And I said something about Shark Tank. She's like, I found this idea on Shark Tank and I have an idea that I want to do. And then we started talking about it or whatever. And then she sent me a message like 40 minutes later. And she said, my stepsister said that her idea was stupid. And I was like, you know what? I had so many people tell me my idea was stupid, but I made $2,000 stupid dollars in 2 hours yesterday. So, again, you got to believe in it. And if you don't
Yeah.
believe in it, no one else is going to believe in it.
No, absolutely. That is the heart of it, because you have to show that confidence on every customer call, on every demo. If they don't believe that you believe in your product and believe that you've got the next best thing since sliced bread, that you're going to fail.
That's it. I think right there, it's not you're going to die, you're going to fail. That's it. Put it on a t-shirt, Matt. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I really do. And hopefully we get you on again. And for everyone who's out there listening, please go visit PeopleLogic.Ai. Go check out what he's doing. And I really feel like your product is going to blow up here soon. So keep up the hustle, man. I don't have to tell you anything, right? You already exited your first company. Save some out there for the rest of us, Matt.
Oh,
right?
there's, what? That's one thing I have found. There's no shortage.
For
So,
sure. All right.
Adam, I
Awesome.
appreciate it. And thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right.